It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
Hello and welcome to Alive After Reading. I'm Tim Niederreiter, and with me today is an author, a podcaster, an audio dramatist, or at least the writer of one. Damn it. I'm not perfect at these introductions. Welcome to the show, Paul Sading. Or should I say welcome back?
Thank you for the welcome back. I appreciate you being brave enough to bring me on again.
Oh, it's no problem. I mean, I'm kind of, really, it's that first time where you don't know what you're getting into. That's the real nail biter.
That's very true.
Yeah. So Paul, was first on this show back in episode 29, which is over a year ago now. It's surprising. It feels like time has flown.
Yeah, and many things have changed in the inversion of this episode number. That's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It's, I finally started seeing some actual monetary success in my writing. That's pretty good. You became a published author. I mean, you started publishing. It's great.
Yes. Yeah. So 3 times, actually.
Yeah. You liked it so much you didn't stop. It's still going. So what stuff have you published, and tell our audience a little bit about that?
Well, when I spoke with you the first time, I was well into audio drama, fiction podcasting, for those who aren't necessarily up on the current lingo. But the goal in that was always to start working towards novels. I always wanted to publish. So I took the season of Subject Found, which is my most successful audio drama, and I adapted that first season to a novel, and I deliberately used that to kind of learn the ropes of this independent publishing thing. But like you said, I couldn't stop there. In the process of doing that, I got so excited about it, I realized other audio dramatists could take their shows and novelize them. Once I had that learning curve down, obviously, novelize their own works without much pain. So I went and wrote a nonfiction book as well. A few months later, it came out in October of this year, to kind of help novelists, authors, memoirists, poets, whatever, look at their books and realize that, hey, you could start a podcast to grow your audience, kind of thing. So that was fun. But in doing that, I missed my fiction. So I had to go out and publish a third book in 1 year to get me back into fiction. Just in time for the holidays, I released a horror anthology with 12 stories. So I was clever and I called it The 12 Deaths of Christmas, and released that in November, right on Thanksgiving. So 3 books in 1 year after spending 40 years not publishing at all.
Wow. Yeah. That's a big spike all of a sudden. But just like any success or any event, really, there's always something, there's a lot leading up to it.
Yes.
Obviously you've got the audio dramas, you kind of got your feet wet there. And that's really cool to me. To me though, it does seem kind of, don't take this the wrong way, but it seems a little counterintuitive because you still have to write everything.
Right.
And then you have to have other people perform it. Like, that seems like a bigger task than just writing a book. But maybe it's because I've never actually done that.
Well, and that's why you're absolutely right. It was much easier to go from those scripts to adapting it to novel than it would be to take a novel and go to scripts. It would be more work doing it that way. I much prefer, matter of fact, I don't know if we'll talk about it because it's so far off. You might have to have me back a third time in the long, long future. But I just started world building this past month for a fantasy series that I'm going to do. I don't know how big it'll be yet. I'm not that far into outlining, but I plan on numerous books in this epic medieval fantasy. And I'm going to have an associate product with that, which will be an audio drama. But I'm going to do a standalone story for the audio drama because I don't want to have to do that reverse engineering of taking a novel, breaking it down into script. So no, your gut is leading you in the right direction. It's much easier to go from script to book than it is from book to script.
Yeah, I suppose. Do you do the audio production as well for your audio dramas?
Some of them.
Okay.
But yeah, it's something like Subject Found. I'm very lucky to work with a Dog and Pony Studios is what they're named. They're out of Las Vegas. And man, they're professionals. I mean, they do this. This is how they earn their living. But John, the owner, is a huge audio drama geek, and I cast him in that first season. He was my Bigfoot investigator, and he fell in love with voice acting. And he said, man, if you ever have anything for me, I want in. So I said, okay, how about season 2? And how about Who Killed Julie? I was because those are big worlds, especially Subject Found, and I can't do that kind of stuff that they can do.
Oh, absolutely. Because I've been a big fan of podcasts forever, and I've listened to some podcast novels from back in the day. I think Matthew Wayne Selznick, Brave Men Run was the one I listened, and J.C. Hutchins' Seventh Son, just the first book of that one though. I listened to both of those series, and those were pretty much straight reads though. You know, they weren't audio dramas.
Yeah, I can do, and for my patrons, I do some of those just straight narrations with maybe a little sound effect bed underneath it. And I do lighter things. I do an exclusive audio drama for them that I completely do write, edit, and produce and voice act. And I do my Diary of a Madman, but that's heavily layered with sound effects to hide all the things that I screw up. So there's a method to my madness. But it can, if you want to have like a classy, well-produced, well-sounding audio drama, you're talking heavy lifting. Make no bones about it. It is intense.
Absolutely. I'm considering getting into audiobooks in the coming year and recording some audiobooks. I
hope you do.
Yeah, I'm kind of more than considering. I'm probably going to have I'm getting a new audio setup, so hopefully that'll make the quality good enough that I won't have to do as much as I would right now.
Right.
Because these podcasts are, I'm sure the listeners will know this already. These podcasts aren't always perfect in sound quality because they're not much of a sound editor yet.
Well, it's one of those things you kind of learn as you go too, and then for somebody like me, I'm lucky that I have just conversations with sound people. They geek out about it. They know I'm an idiot when it comes to it, and they kind of help me a little bit here and there. And it's just 8 years of doing this that you pick up those little tricks along the way to improve it. There's no way I could make a epic leap from what I first sounded like. Oh my gosh, if I put those podcast episodes back out into the world, it'd be laughable. Oh my god.
Well, I gotta say, I got one my early Of Mooks and Monsters shows were all hard left-right mixed because I was recording a Skype call.
Okay.
So one of us would be one side of the headset, the other side would be the other side of the headset.
No.
I fixed those. That you can't find them anymore. Thank goodness.
Yeah, you did the right thing.
But thanks to the help of another podcaster who was like, maybe you don't want to do that for your show. And he was right. That was Rob Matheny. He's awesome. I'm not sure if his podcast is still coming out, but it's the Grim Tidings podcast, and I think it's well worth people's time. So check it out.
I don't know if they are. I think they are. Last I heard, they were on a hiatus, not a definitely indefinite hiatus, but they were on one.
Well, they take a seasonal break. They do like us. They're on only part of the year generally.
Right.
Last time I checked, anyway. Anyway, that very very solid podcast. It when it's on at any rate.
Yeah.
So and just great guys. But but as far as stories, because this show is more about reading than podcasting. As much as I do geek out, and I do love to geek out with others about it. I've got to ask, what's your big? I guess I'm going to just try to surprise you with something. Because what was your what's the big thing you're taking into your writing for this new year? I guess
the big thing is, and I mean this in all the sincerity that I can muster, is focus. I know that sounds so just so plain and boring, but I think a lot of your writer fans, your writer listeners can identify. We've got so many stories in our heads, and they pull at us. And I've been a slave to that because I'm a master tasker. I'm very disciplined, and I can go over the top, and I have a lot of flexibility because my profession requires that I telework. So I can just go balls to the wall and really focus on work to free up 40 minutes of writing right in the middle of my day kind of stuff. I'm very lucky, but that's allowed me to get distracted by taking on 8 billion different things. So this year, for 2019, my focus is to continue to move away from audio drama. I'm not giving it up, but kind of like what your intuition was telling you, it's so taxing that it's really cost me in the book department. I'm behind where I wanted to be as far as novels. So I'm gonna focus on 3 books that I have now that I have to go through the editing process with, while I'm world building on the side for this fantasy series that I hinted at. And the audio drama is gonna get fit in where it can. In the past, it was always audio drama first, and I would write in different pockets. Last year, it was a balance of audio drama and the novels. And this year, it's really kind of flipped. That paradigm is flipped, and it's books first and fit in the audio drama where I can.
Oh,
But
yeah,
I gotta focus. I've got to focus. Joe, I did an interview with Joanna Penn. I think a lot of your listeners will know her.
oh, yeah.
And she really gave, she just, I mean, in an informal conversation, she just said, if you try to be good at everything, you're not going to be good at anything, Paul.
Mhm.
And it really hit me like a ton of bricks. It's common sense, but someone in her position to say something like that, all of us need that kick in the shins. And that was my kick in the shins. I need to get serious about this book stuff because that's where my heart is.
Absolutely. That's not at all plain or drab to me. I mean, I think focus. Maybe it's because I've been geeking out about just the nature of work lately, for
Right.
various reasons. Because I'm a full-time writer, podcaster, and the podcasting really is my hobby. So I'm a full-time writer, and if I'm not killing it with the books, if I'm not actually writing a book every month, I'm doing something wrong, at least for me. I mean, I know not everyone's going to write a book every month, even full-time writers, but I think I could do that. I think I should do that because I need to be hungry enough to go there.
Right.
And that's why I'm so obsessed with work. And I have ADHD. I'm not a focused person. I have been known to bounce between projects like a pinball. So it's actually really cool to hear you say that, I mean, and Joanna Penn's advice is it hits home for me, you can't be good at everything. Nobody is.
Right.
And that's amazing. So a powerful lesson there. As for me, I mean, I think my lesson is actually quite similar, which is why I'm kind of going on about yours. But I just productivity for me is not in writing a bunch of words actually it is in writing a bunch of words. What productivity for me is not writing a bunch of excellent words that are pretty. Because I have this background as an English major. I do appreciate a beautiful sentence. And I have an opinion about what a beautiful sentence is, unlike most people probably. However, and I've been editing. When I was editing my Stormfleet, the first book of my Pillar Universe series. Well, I realized this book was ugly sentences all the way down when I first wrote it, and it wasn't hard to fix that for the release. At least I hope people will be seeing that I put the effort in and fix those some of the gross points. But it really showed me that the story is the only thing that matters in a rough draft.
Right.
And I finally think I learned that this year, which is pretty amazing. I mean, 15 years of writing intensely, more than that now, and I finally learned how to focus on story, I think.
But I think that is, again, kind of like my focus comment. I think that's an imperative to stress and not let listeners gloss over, because so many people get stuck in that cycle while they're still just telling the damn story. And essentially, for me, that's what it boils down to. What you just said, you had that, that flip switch for you where you realized this year, Tim, just tell the damn story in that first draft, right? And so many people don't do that, and they get caught in these cycles that they never get out of. And I think sometimes they're too close to the tree to see the forest. That the reason you're not getting this book done to reach your goal that you promised your Nana is because you're worried about each and every sentence while you still haven't even told us the damn story. Just tell us the story.
100% that, right? because I know people who will say, I write the first sentence and I delete it 1,000 times. That's a common thing for a starting writer.
Yeah.
Well, if you write the sentence 1,000 times, but you delete it every time, you have no sentences. If you write 1,000 sentences, you have 1,000 sentences. You may even have a story at that point, for all I know.
And I think it's kind of like a mindset thing too. I talk about it on my own writing podcast about taking your space, and I have been saying that in recent episodes more and more often, because I the more writers I talk to, the more of a need I see out there. That mindset, it all starts with your mindset, and if you don't believe that you deserve to have a seat at that table, you might not ever actually get to sit down and eat. And I'm trying to convince people that demand a seat at the table. You deserve to be eating with everybody else. And if people can get themselves to that place, then I think they can get to where we're talking about, where it's just tell us a damn story in the first draft,
Yeah.
But they have to believe first
yeah.
that they deserve to be there. And I think if they don't think, if they think or they question whether or not they deserve to be there, that's when they get stuck in that rut that you're talking about. Whereas somebody like me or somebody like what you were talking about with your own year this past year, you realize you deserve a seat. You're going to sit down and start eating. Boom. Let's move.
And absolutely. And if anybody needs permission from somebody to sit down and engage in their, to work their productive life and their creative life is what I meant to say, to be creative. If you need permission to be creative, well, I mean, I am the voice in your ear right now, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
So I give you permission. I don't know. That's all you need. You don't even need that. I just figure it might be helpful in case you haven't heard it yet.
Well, and there's a lot of people who don't. I mean, you and I have seen this conversation in our Facebook group too, and other writer groups as well, where other writers will reach out to a group and just cast that net to see who has that kind of support. If you don't have that support network somewhere, I can understand why it would be hard, how it would be difficult to get some traction to get going with that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and it's not just the nerves, because I mean, I suffer from depression, ADHD, I'm autistic, I have all these problems. And if I can do it, I think people I can gain the confidence to publish a book, that is. And it took me a long time to do it. Let's be fair here, people. I only started publishing a couple of years ago, and I started writing long before that, many, many years before that for me. A good percentage of my life ago. And it's kind of amazing how long it takes to actually get good at something. If you have, but don't dig yourself deeper, I guess, is the other thing. Like, don't give up. You got to start somewhere.
Right. Well, and it goes back to, I'm a sports geek as well. I'm one of those anomalies in our writer community. I actually am athletic and I like sports. But it goes back to that 10,000 hours of practice. I'm a huge soccer fan. Lionel Messi is the greatest player that's probably ever played the game. And even he says that, you don't even start getting good at something until you've practiced that thing for 10,000 hours. So you can't sit down at your keyboard and type out 100 words or 100 chapters and expect to be the next J.K. Rowling. You need to sweat. You've got to sweat.
Absolutely. Yeah. Actually, my twin brother has this thing he says where he says, your first day on your job is the first day on a new job is your first opportunity to start getting better at that job. Mm-hmm. You're not good at it yet. You just got this new job. You don't know any of those skills.
Yep.
They're doing something you've never done before. It's the same it's exactly what you're talking about. So I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah, you don't get good at something by not doing it either. That's I guess the bottom line. Exactly. So yeah. So as far as writing process evolves, it also kind of makes our goals evolve, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely, absolutely.
Because I started out thinking, well, one book a year would be really cool, and I did that for a while back when I was a teenager. But then, and now it's more like a book a month would be really nice. Maybe I should just do that. But I'm starting to think that kind of goal is actually maybe counterproductive for me.
Interesting.
because I mean, the amount of writing I can do is really kind of staggering, if because of all the time I have.
Right.
So I mean, like, I've got to stop thinking about it in terms of what is good enough, and just do everything I can, if that makes sense.
Do you feel like though? See, here's I can identify with what you're saying on a certain level, and then I also, when people say stuff like that, I worry that they are the fast burners. Whereas they're intimidatingly productive, proficient, but then in a blink of an eye, all of a sudden they disappear, and like 6 months later, everybody in the community is going, "Hey, whatever happened to, whoever it is?"
No,
So, do you think that it might have something to do with like an internal clock process where you have to balance yourself? For like example, this year, last year I published 3 books, and I didn't publish the first one until June. This year I'm not going for 4 books. I'm keeping it at 3. If I hit 3, I've hit my target, because in the background, it helps me keep that balance and helps me keep that freedom and that focus that I talked about earlier. But it also allows me to start planning for those out years when I want to be more like you, where I want to be more aggressive in the market, especially with that series. So maybe that's kind of what you've been doing. You just didn't put a name to it, maybe?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, keeping it, kind of keeping myself at a kind of easy level, for me anyway, an easy level of 500,000 or 600,000 words a year. Well, it's more 200,000 or 300,000 words a year, and just publishing what I could out of that is, that works all right.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I need to produce bigger books. That's one thing. That's kind of why I've stopped thinking about it in terms of books. Maybe that's what I'm trying to get at.
Gotcha.
Because sometimes a book will be long. It will take 2 or 3 months to write. But as long as I'm doing as much as I can to finish that book every week.
Yes.
And I do take the weekend off. I'm not a total workaholic. I actually do have a weekend. And I think you'd probably be surprised at how little I actually do any given day. But I don't think but it is true. Burnout is a thing. And, what was it? Robert E. Howard, this goes all the way back to the pulp writers like Howard, who actually, he only lived at the age of 30.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know? He wrote the Conan the Barbarian stories.
I didn't know he was that young. No,
he killed himself when he was very young. He was he was 30, 31, and he committed suicide. It's really tragic, because he was actually a really good writer for somebody that young, especially. I mean, I should say I'm about the same age, but as he was when he was at his peak.
Right.
But it's weird because he's just like, wow, he just couldn't handle it anymore because he was writing so fast, and there must have been other factors. Obviously, I wouldn't put it on his writing. That's probably not the cause of his depression. But I know a lot of pulp writers burned out because they had to write so quickly.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've said this to my own fans and Twitter followers before, and I'm not flippant about it. People will. I don't know about you, Tim, but people have written to me, messaged me, and asked or expressed envy/jealousy about how much I can produce. And I've been very genuine in how I respond. I try to do it with humor because it's less threatening, but I'm very serious when I tell people, don't envy a writer's brain. You don't necessarily want to be in there. We spend so much time in there exploring ourselves, exploring humanity. You need an antagonist in a story. So how do you get an antagonist? You got to find the scumbags in the world to inspire you. Don't necessarily envy that, because the person who doesn't write, they go do their profession, the job they love, the job they hate, whatever. They don't necessarily have to keep reflecting on the nature of humankind, whereas as creatives, we have to. So I can understand somebody who's proficient, like he was. You spend that much time dwelling on these things, these aspects of human nature, that just feeds into friggin' depression. It feeds into it. For me, at least. I can only speak for me, but it definitely does. So that, kind of back to what you were talking about with your own process, that's why I asked you about the balance question. Because I know I need just some good, stupid humor or video game time to kind of level out all the other junk that goes on in my head because of how much I'm writing.
No, it is interesting you mention that. I've got my single greatest challenge in writing more is actually relaxing effectively because I'm not good at it.
Yep. No, you preach. I totally feel what you're saying.
I need to relax about it. Like I've made a pact with myself. I get to start playing Dragon Age Inquisition. I know I'm way behind my video games. After New Year's, because I mean I'll be traveling, won't be able to play it. Anyway, but once I get home from traveling, it's going to be all about two things: writing and playing games that actually have story, but they take my mind away from my own work. Honestly, I mean that's one of the things that I know. I've heard Kevin J. Anderson say things like, as a writer, everything you do is writing related. And I think that's really dangerous, actually. Not to cast shade at him. He's a very successful writer in his own right, but I was just saying, it's kind of a scare. I mean, some people probably can't handle that if they've got the right attitude toward writing, but I don't think I have that attitude. So I got to take some time and relax. You're absolutely right.
But I think it's again, it's one of those things where you have to be honest with yourself. I can see exactly where he's coming from. Where it doesn't matter what you're doing, trip to the grocery store, dinner out with a significant other, watching a show, or even like you're talking about playing a game, and that brain doesn't shut off necessarily. That writer brain where you're critiquing things. I'm the worst about that. That's why I think watching comedy is so productive for me, because I can actually just enjoy the comedy. Give me any other genre, seriously, anything else, and I'll start picking things apart. And
that's funny, yeah, because I pick apart comedy given the chance, but yeah, different structure.
You got to know what works for you. Definitely, that I literally, I think I annoy my family sometimes by how much comedy I watch, but I do it because anything else, and I'm picking stuff apart. That writer brain doesn't shut off. So I see what he's saying. I can identify with it, but I also know myself well enough to kind of counterbalance that.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So this has been kind of an interesting episode. I thanks for being on the show, Paul.
Of course, no, thank you for taking a risk and having me back.
Oh, it was no risk. It was a calculated plan. Yes, not even a risk. No risk here. I consider this a win. But actually, there's one last segment. I just kind of jumped ahead. One last bit I wanted to talk about is what have you been reading lately, and anything you can recommend to our audience?
See, this is kind of humiliating to actually admit publicly, but for the long, I'm a contrarian by nature. If people love things, I automatically hate it. I don't want any part of it. And for me, I'm either reading epic fantasy along the lines of Robert Jordan type stuff. I know there's some books in the Wheel of Time series that people love to hate on, but I love getting my hands on an 8, 9, 1,000 page book. That's I geek out about that. But so I'll do that, or I'll read horror. And for years, people have been telling me, or I've seen comments about Jim Butcher and the Dresden Files. And I looked at it and I'm like, contemporary fantasy, not my thing. If it doesn't have armor and magic systems and dragons and no conveniences of modern life, I don't want it. I was set. I was not going to read Jim Butcher. And then lo and behold, I was in a used bookstore, and I will publicly admit this. I do use bookstores for entry into someone's writing. If I can find your first entry book into a series, I'll pick it up. And then if I like you, I'll go buy your new stuff so you actually make some money off of it. But I saw the Dresden Files series starter, and I said, screw it. Everybody's talking about Jim Butcher. Let me give this guy a try. It's like 29 cents. It was something stupid because we're trying to clear out the store. And I'll tell you what, so I am like a full-on Jim Butcher convert now. So I'm reading his Dresden Files as we speak.
Well, awesome. I've read the first 10 of those, I think. They're all pretty solid, honestly. I like
his voice. He's one of those.
His voice is great.
His voice is just great, and it's that's what jumps out more than anything else is an author's voice. So I think it hit me on the first 10 pages. I was like, oh, I'm gonna like this dude.
I can totally see where you're coming from, because that's exactly the kind of feeling I get with every one of those. Like, come on, it's just the right amount of humor.
Yes.
Yeah, it's great, and he's just really endearing for the most part.
Right.
And it's interesting because I do really enjoy a book with like a kind of more. I mean, Harry's definitely a flawed protagonist, Harry Dresden.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I was gonna say he's more like I do like the more darker conflicted characters, and I don't think he falls into that category for a long while at least. But that series is just good fun for a long while.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm fortunate that I was contrarian for so long because I've got a ton to catch up on.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think there's a lot more for me to say about what I've been reading lately. Oh yeah, I did actually. There is something. I forget the name of the author, but the movie is coming out next year. The Mortal Engines is the new is the Peter Jackson movie that's coming out soon. And I finally got the first book, the only book I have on Google Play because they kept giving me coupons. Anyway, so I've been reading that on my phone of all places. And it's actually pretty good. I mean, it's a good story. The world's interesting. I have a lot of problems with the style, but that's just me. So and it's not. It doesn't matter that much. It's the bottom line for me.
You know, it's funny because it's funny that you mentioned that. I literally this week don't remember who it was, but they were talking about the marketing aspect of creation, and they cited that as an example of an utter failure because of how bad it's doing at the box office, because of the trailers, how poor the trailers were to get us invested in the story. So I was going to ask you that, and you kind of answered it before I got a chance to ask you about the book version of the story. If it was, again, I've got a bias. I am a character-driven reader and writer. I think we all fall into that if we're plot or character. So when I read that about it, I was kind of curious about your thoughts about that.
Well, definitely, it's actually definitely a very it's very much more of a world book.
Okay.
With a little bit with some plot to it. But so far, but what it feels like to me is more of a classic coming of age story. I'm still actually pretty early into the book, but I'm enjoying it. And I mean, there's some style point. Again, the style points were the bigger obstacle to me. Mostly just the heavy use of passive voice.
Oh,
and weird omniscient points of view at times. But but actually the book's really readable, even though because I'm such a nerd about prose, it was like walking to the brick wall in the first page because there's like 3 sentences of passive voice in the first paragraph.
Oh no.
There were 3 was's in the first paragraph. Anyway, I'm not trying to criticize. I actually don't think it's. I don't think it's to the. I mean, I definitely do not think that's the best way to write a book, but it's not how I would have done it. But isn't nobody would write the same book? So there you go.
Well, exactly.
Anyway, so Paul, we are really out of time now. So where can people find you and your work on the internet?
If folks just go over to paulsating.com, paulsating.com, you'll find all the books and all the podcasts that I have spent the last 4 years of my life consuming every free moment creating. So head over there, come say hi, follow me on Twitter, stuff like that. I love chatting with new folks. But I want to thank you, Tim. It was great to actually come back on and actually get a chance to just have a fun conversation with you about this stuff. I geek out about it.
Oh, shooting the shit is what we do here. So consider it shot. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. And thanks for being on the show again, Paul. And anybody who wants to can find more of this show at mentalcellularpublications.com. We're hosted by Libsyn. So if you want to find the most up-to-date episodes, check Libsyn. And it's Libsyn with the show title as the page, I believe. And and check out my newest book, Stormfleet. It's out on Amazon right now. You can get it in paperback or in ebook. So, thanks for listening, everybody, and have a good one.
That tears it.